Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lakshmi's Leadership Lounge. And this conversation is about Leadership 2.0. And in today's world, leadership is a journey and not a destination. We all need to keep in touch with what does it mean to be a leader in these times. And the plan is for every week, we'll bring a different person who will bring a perspective. This week, we have someone who is from the Indian Administrative Service. Just a little bit of a background about Indian Administrative Service. The entire governance of India, which is a democracy of over 1.3 billion people, is done by the members of the Indian Administrative Service. It's a very elite group. It's extremely difficult to get into. On an average, about 50 to 100 people get into it every year. And since the program started till now, there's only about 5,000 people in the Indian Administrative Service. And each year, about 50 to 100 get in on an average, and less than 20% are women. So this is just to give you a perspective of what Indian Administrative Service is in India. And today we have someone who is been sort of a path breaker in many ways. And Ira Singhal is our guest today. And Ira Singhal is one of the toppers of the IAS program with a disability. And she had to fight a huge battle about it. And we will talk about the battle later. But the most important thing is she's an engineer, she has an MBA, she taught the Indian Administrative Service. So you are going to be meeting a person who is first of many, and that's just the beginning. And I'm sure you're going to hear her name online and offline a lot. Hi, Ira.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure. Welcome to the show. Ira, I gave a little bit of a background of what Indian Administrative Service is. So tell us a little bit about what you do today on a day-to-day basis, and why did you choose Indian Administrative Service?
So actually, the best part about my job is that we do not have a similar day to the one previous. Every day of our service, every day of our career is a new day with new challenges, new opportunities, and new things to handle. I can guarantee you in the last 5 years, I've never had a single day which was somewhat like a day which had already happened. So I have worked as an SDM in a rural area, subdivisional magistrate, where I, held courts. I stopped child labor. I stopped child marriage. I stopped green land conversions. I worked on pollution. After that, I was a deputy commissioner in the municipal corporation. So there I worked on handling the urban issues, which includes your sanitation, your sewer, your roads, your, just management of the whole city area. And now I'm in a department which deals with social sector. So I handle policies related to women, to children, to transgender people, to people with disabilities, and all sorts of people who need social security and social sector help. So it's been a very, very different sort of profile. And that's the best part about being in the Indian Administrative Service, that we get to serve people in different ways. To answer your second question, which was how did I come here? So ever since I was a child, I wanted to do something wherein my work, help people, help the world around me. So I thought of either becoming a doctor or an IAS or an IFS officer, because those were the things that I thought you got to work with people and you got to, help fix people's problems. So, so unfortunately, my dad did not let me take biology in class 12. Because according to him, I looked like a patient myself. So nobody was going to get treatment from a doctor who looked like a patient. And so he was very clear that you cannot be a good doctor. And
that's the very reason you could have been a good doctor, because I think you can empathize with this.
Thank you. But my dad disagreed. So, and being an obedient kid that I was, I kind of did not go into medical after that. And so I landed up with an engineering and an MBA degree, which is usual for most Indians these days. But what happened was, in my corporate career, I was working 20-hour days. And I had an amazingly exciting job. I got to do really innovative stuff, and I had an amazingly nice company. I mean, my company sold chocolates and happiness for a living, right?
Wow,
So,
nice.
yeah, right. So, you can't have anything better than that. And this was a company which had a room called the chocolate room. And that's precisely what everybody imagines it to be. It is a room full of chocolates, and you are free to go and eat as many as you want at any time of the day. So, I mean, it can't get better than that, right? But what happened was that I realized that after working 20 hours, there was nobody who said that because I had worked so hard, their life was better.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I needed my work to have meant something to someone. I needed my work to have, made an impact. And that's when I started going back to my childhood dream, because I realized that what I needed was that if I work so hard, there should be someone who's grateful for that work, or someone whose life I had affected positively.
Yeah.
So I decided to give up my really cushy corporate career and do civil services, and that's how I
Now
ended.
you actually, I think, topped the exam,
Yes.
Ira,
Yes.
and but still you had to fight a battle for many years to become an IAS officer.
Yeah.
So tell us, why was that?
As a person with disability, you do not fulfill the medical criteria
You can tell
required.
a little bit about what is your disability, Ira, and
Okay.
then what you had to fight.
Okay. My disability is actually scoliosis. Scoliosis is basically a curvature of the backbone, but it's not really one of the listed disabilities like that. So it's the impact of scoliosis which I had to fulfill as my disability. Now, when it comes to government examination, there are two criteria that are there for every person with disability. One is what is your disability, and the second is what are the abilities that you can that are required for that job. So, in my particular case, I fulfill the ability requirement for all the jobs, but my disability was not accepted in any of the jobs except for the IAS. And now, what happened was that in my first attempt, I had gotten a rank which was not good enough to get into the IS or the IFS. So I actually started preparing for my next attempt. You can give up to 6 attempts now for civil services. So I started preparing for my second attempt. While I was preparing, I started getting phone calls from other candidates, and they started asking me, "Do you know what happened to you?" And I didn't know something had happened to me. I didn't even know that. So, if someone calls you and tells you, "Do you know what happened to you?" and you don't know something has happened to you, you start wondering and you start investigating. So I started investigating as to what had happened. And that's when I found out that there is this sort of criteria wherein my disability was what was rejected, while I fulfilled the criteria. This is the ability requirement of each job. So that made no sense at all to me, because if you are saying that I can do the job, then why shouldn't you give it to me?
Right.
And all those people who had been calling me were actually other candidates to whom the same thing had happened. They had also been rejected on the same criteria. So, and I thought that I came into the system to make a difference to someone else. So maybe this is my first chance. This is the first place I need to start. And so I went to court. I filed a lawsuit. I was eligible as per my rank for the Indian Revenue Service. So I filed a case in that, and I had to go to court. And after my judgment came, by the way, while I was fighting in the court, I was also giving the exam. And in the next two attempts as well, I got the same service, similar rank and same service again. So that was like, 3 times same thing happened. And every time I was rejected on the same criteria. My judgment came after my third attempt. But I was still not given a job, because everybody in government had sort of forgotten about my case, and sort of forgotten that I existed, and forgotten that they had to do this.
Yeah.
So while I was reminding them, there was also this element that maybe they will file an appeal, because in India you can always go in appeal, right? If you lose a case. So I wasn't sure if they were going to file an appeal or not. But so that's how I gave my final attempt. And I thought, even after the judgment, I gave my final attempt. And and they sent me a letter to come join, the day after my final attempt exams ended. And by the way, your audience isn't exactly who would be giving civil services, but just to tell you, giving civil services exam is pretty much the biggest torture any human can do to themselves.
Yeah, yeah,
It,
yeah.
it's absolutely it's a torture. It's a physical, mental, emotional, and a financial torture on yourself. And this is something that I tell people, that if you hate someone, if you have an enemy and you want to destroy their lives, you should advise them to give civil services exam. That's the
So
best
you're
way
now
to destroy
saying you're
lives.
your own enemy by putting yourself in the civil
Yeah,
services exam.
yes. No, it's just that exam process is
I know.
so taxing that it's almost like a torture. So,
But, yeah,
I mean, imagine out of 10 lakh people who give that exam, there will only be 1,000 who will get selected.
right.
The
Yeah,
rest
yeah,
of the people are just going through that pain for nothing, right?
yeah,
And you can very easily be in that rest of the people. So,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
unfortunately, because I was not given, even after a court case,
Right.
I gave my final attempt, and this time I got into IAS with rank 1.
Correct. Yeah. So it's like a million people give the exam, 100 people get in. And even to get in, I know that you have to do a lot of written exams, and there's a very tough interview process.
Yes.
And so it's a very, very difficult thing to get into. So congratulations for doing your fight and getting into it. So I want to ask, now that you are in the system, I mean, you're actually the government now, right?
Yes. Yes.
So it's sort of, you've been part of very, very large systemic change, but you also witness very real change on the ground, you know. So in what way can one officer make a difference here? And give me an example of where you felt, wow, you know, as a beginning person, even I can make a difference.
Just to give you an example, Lakshmi, just by going to office every day, we affect 400 to 500 lives. And if I
Mm-hmm.
just do my job, with a regular sincerity, not even going above and beyond, just by the regular sincerity, that's the number of lives you can affect positively.
Right.
In my first year as an SDM, I actually completed more than 400 court cases. I finished that many court cases. So imagine that many families that were having to come to court, and some cases were as old as 40 years.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I rescued 300 roughly 335 child and bonded laborers from bondage and from those jobs.
Yeah.
I gave jobs to 2 transgenders
Mm-hmm.
in first time full time employment inside a government office.
Wow.
So and by the way, this transgender jobs were in a proper a patriarchal rural area,
Right. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was so I think as an individual officer you can make a difference. And I know that this is something that a lot of my batchmates, a lot of officers do. Of course, the stories don't always come out because
Yeah.
not all those stories can come out, but I
Right.
know that a lot of my batchmates have done similar work. So a single
Yeah.
officer is where the change starts.
Yeah. And another passion that I'm sure both of us share is actually women in profession,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So, we saw a 2019 report that says that there's only about 88 secretary rank officers. In general, it's a very elite position to have secretary rank officers, and only 11 are women. And and even at the state and UT level, only 1 out of 32 chief secretaries are women. Of course, there is the funnel itself, right?
Yeah.
When somebody comes in, when you're only 20% of them who are women, that sort of a difference keeps maintaining. But tell me a little bit about what can be done to increase the number of women in top positions, and get more women into this, or keeping more women. Just tell me a little bit about, do you see a huge drop off, or how is it for women in Indian administrative services, and what can we do to have more women in top positions?
When you're inside the service, it's there's really not much discrimination. There is a little bit of it, but not much. And and that discrimination is not about the system. It's just generally 1 or 2 officers who have that patriarchal mindset, but not
Mhm.
really something that you feel. as part of the system. So when you're inside the system, the problem doesn't exist. And the exit or entry, actually, very few people leave this system. Very few people leave this service. So the bigger problem is that at the societal level, people do not trust their daughters or give their daughters that much opportunity. See, unfortunately, India, the primary role of daughter is still to get married and go away.
Correct.
Yeah. And there is this age at which you need to get married. While that same age is when you need to sit for civil services exam and clear it. So parents would rather marry off their daughters than give her this opportunity to make a career for herself within this system. And that's the reason that we have so few women here. Because a lot of the parents are more focused on, getting their daughter married off and going away rather than letting her explore herself, letting her have opportunities. In fact, almost all the women that come in here are coming from very liberal-minded families and from families that are very, do have dreams for their daughters and don't discriminate between men and women, because this is a very, very... one of the most patriarchal sort of positions that people think of when you think of this. People are still not very convinced that, girls are going to lead them. And most families are very unsupportive of their daughters making their careers like this, going into such leadership roles. I mean, they would be happy if she got in, but they don't give her that opportunity to get in. Because it does take time and effort. Like I said, it's one of the biggest tortures you're doing to yourself. So it does take that many years. It does take that much effort. And it is a risky proposition. I mean, 100 out of a million. So it's a risky proposition.
Correct. Yeah.
So a lot of people are not ready to let their daughters risk their ears like that. Because, that thing about not finding the right mate, such an issue.
I was just going to say that if you're an IAS officer, I have to find another one who's bigger than an IAS officer to marry to you. So
that's another problem.
It's a problem. And I must say that it's also exposure, right? I mean, I remember when I was growing up, I had an amazing physics teacher, tuition teacher called Pachko, who was in my neighborhood in my 11th and 12th. And he wanted me to be an IAS officer. I mean, he was just like, Lakshmi, my dream is you should become an IAS officer. But for me, it always felt like something far away. Like IAS officer to me was somebody who lived in this exclusive bungalow, something like that. And, my father was a doctor and I had others who were in the science field and all that stuff. But to me, I couldn't relate to that life. And especially if people found out how much difference you can make, like what you were talking about, how many lives you can change, and see the positive side of it. More exposure is there. I think more people will come in because it just feels like, oh my God, it's something I'll get into. I get transferred every 2 years and this and that. You only see the very elite nature of it, but you don't see the impact you can make, And I still think of Mr. Pachko and I say, man, every day when I went to tuition, he would say, Lakshmi, you should become an IAS officer. And so but it was not even, I was a topper in my college and all that, but it was not even in my lexicon to try for that exam. So I think exposure is also very, very important. And talking about exposure, I mean, you're one of the few people, forget women, who has a technology, you have an engineering background, you have an MBA, which is a business background, you worked in a corporate office, and then you came into administrative service. In what way can like a government and a corporate and a technology can come together? What lessons can you learn from each of this side of your persona?
Actually, I think this sort of combination works the best. Because I am aware of technological interventions that can make things easier, that can make governance easier, and I'm very comfortable with technology. And in future, it's all going to be about technology, and it's all going to be about usage of technology. So I understand technology, and I can understand how and what solutions will make the right impact in the work we are doing. and I'm comfortable at, so I'm not hesitant about bringing in technology, right?
Mhm.
Secondly, I think I honestly think everybody in the government, especially in our service, should get an MBA degree.
Yeah.
The biggest thing an MBA teaches you is resource management and people management,
Yeah.
and it helps you think strategically. So
Mhm.
what you can do is you can see the long term impact of everything. You're
Mhm.
comfortable with numbers and maths, and you can look at data and you can immediately see where it is leading. And
Mhm.
my job is actually all about people management.
Mhm.
It's about teams. I In most of the things, I need to just make sure my team is on board and my team is willing to do that, and
Correct.
understand my team's problems, solve their differences, get them on the same platform, and just ensure that the work gets done faster, and also
Mhm.
have a positive view of things. So I think MBA degree completely helps, plus having the corporate sector background, having worked before, I know
Yeah.
where things can go wrong, you know
Yeah.
uh, and
Yeah.
see, everybody makes mistakes in their first job.
Right.
Thankfully, I made mine in the corporate, so uh, the
Yeah.
the impact was less. Like, if I made them in the government sector, the impact would be a lot more.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
So, is there a program where an IAS officer can go off for 2 years, work in
yeah,
a
yeah,
company, and come back and
yes,
stuff?
yeah,
And
it's
how?
later in our careers we are allowed to do that. You can go for up to, I think, 5 years, if
Yeah.
I'm not wrong. I might have to check the data, but there is definitely a scope for that. You can go out and
Okay.
work and come back.
So let me ask you now. Let's switch a little bit to your personal life, Ira. If I said, as a person, you have ambitions for yourself, obviously, right? And what would you like to see yourself as, your leadership style, your impact? Now, today, even yesterday it was corporate, today it's IAS, and tomorrow it could be something, you're a daughter, there's many, many roles you play in your life. As a person, what's the next skill you would like to acquire, next thing you would like to learn or move forward?
I think that's the good part about my job, that we get exposure to so many things,
Hmm.
that we don't have to plan too much in detail. But I have mainly been serving in Delhi, so possibly I would like to go out and serve in other areas in slightly more backward territories, and get that exposure.
Mm-hmm, hmm.
So
Great.
yeah.
And how about personally? What are your hobbies? What do you love doing when
All right.
you're not working, which is like very few hours, I think. So,
Yeah. So I actually love traveling. I read a lot. In fact, right in front of me is my huge bookcase.
yeah.
So and I am one of those people who explores everything. So I've kind of explored almost all things in my life.
Yeah.
Traveling is something that obviously don't get so much time for now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I try having one big trip every year,
Yeah. So
because
what is your ideal place to visit? Like, you
uh,
would love to go there.
so I actually have gone to those places already. I've been to Egypt and I've been to Greece. So I
Uh-huh.
love historical places. So I've done those trips, and those, like, I went there and I thought, I am done with life now. I can happily retire into oblivion now that I've seen these places. So
Yeah.
yeah, for me, traveling is the one big thing that gets me going.
Okay. So let's come back to, some of the things that you really stood for is how do you encourage more inclusive workforce, right? Be it disability or women or transgender or all these kinds of things. And while it's coming into the lexicon, it's still, we are far away from true equality.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things you would like to see corporations or companies or individuals do to have a more inclusive uh, community?
Um, I think it's not just about corporations, it's also about the society that we all come from.
Correct.
Unfortunately, whatever other prejudices of, that I carry with me in the social sector is what I carry with me to work.
Correct.
And that's where we need to make a change. We need to um, help the world around us realize that everybody deserves an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It's simply about giving people an opportunity and then judging whether they can do it or not. What we are doing is we're prejudging everybody and saying we don't think you can, unless you. And also, no two people are similar. So no two women will be similar, no two transgenders will be similar, no two people with disabilities will be similar. So we need to give everybody a new opportunity like that. You need to have colorless criteria. You cannot decide that if it's a woman, she will not work as long or will not work as hard. And honestly, this is a math that I tell everybody. If you're a family of 4 and only one person earns, and that person earns 100 rupees, right? At the end of the day, for that person, for their own disposal, only 25 is available. But if it's a family of 4 and everybody earns whatever they can, somebody earns 50, somebody earns 20, somebody earns 30, and one person is earning 100. That still leaves 50 for the person who was earning 100, right?
Yeah.
So, plus, if you are the only person who is capable and standing up, you also carry the emotional and the physical burden of others. Because, for example, if your wife is someone who's just trained to be in the house, so every household task which needs someone to go out and do that, you will be the one doing it. Right? And if your child is a child with disability and you are the one who's not making them be capable and independent and go out and do, then you will actually be doing extra physical labor for them. And taking their emotional burden as well, because when they are upset about what you've taught them is to feel pity about themselves and feel less. So it's very important that we allow everybody to feel empowered, and empowerment comes from financial empowerment. Which is why, from a social perspective, it is very important, and from a very selfish point of view, it is very important that everybody around me is contributing their best, so that I don't have to take their burden, and my money that I earn can be for me.
Correct. And also, not to mention, especially in a workforce kind of a thing, when you have diversity, your diversity of thought, that's the root of innovation.
Yes,
I mean, if everybody says yes to the same thing, it's not valid at all.
So I'll give you a small example. I went to inspect a children's home. Okay. And this was about children from the ages of 6 to 12. And when I went to the toilet, all the wash basins came up to here for me. I mean, now what they had done after that, once they made those whole thing and children were there, they realized that children couldn't use that. So then they built little steps. So single step, nice high step they've built there. What is that leading to? All the children having to climb constantly. Right? And danger of falling off when they're washing their face or brushing or something, they can easily fall off, right? And that's the problem, because all the team of members who was building that was men.
Correct. They should put the team at a lower level instead of...
They did it for what was convenient to them.
Correct.
Not thinking about the user, right?
Correct. So,
which is why you need every different type of person into the policy making, into every project, because that's when it will be usable by more number of people. So, your volumes will go up, your numbers will go up, and the usability of your product goes up. Just simply from that perspective, you need as many different types of people, and you need an inclusive workforce.
We have a section called Stump Me If You Can. So you get to ask me questions. So what would you like to ask me?
You've been doing conversations like this for quite some time. How much of an impact do you think they really make? And I mean, if you have any stories where you know of any impact that has been made by conversations like this.
It's I have to think for a minute. It's a very important question, because a lot of times we attend a lot of things and we listen and then we go away. And so what? Because I always ask so what question for whatever I'm doing. There are two things I've observed. Sometimes you don't even know the impact you made immediately, and it just comes back in a very weird way later on. So I'll tell you, recently I was talking to somebody, a very, very successful entrepreneur, and I was interviewing him. And like this, we were chatting, and then I said something about, tell me what impact you have received. He said to me, many years ago when I was a very young person, like 4 or 5 years ago when he was young professional. He said, I listened to your talk, and you said in that the one thing that will make or break your future is who you choose to spend the rest of your life with. So don't be guided by emotions, but really think about who you want to marry in a business conference. And he said, I've never heard anybody talk about something so personal in a business conference. He said, to be honest, in my life, that advice has stayed with me, and I took that very, very seriously. And I feel that was one of the best advices I got for my business life. So sometimes the impact you make, you don't know immediately. And secondly, sometimes, like we worked with Dr. Jitendra Sharma, like this, I was interviewing him. He runs something called AMTZ, where they are doing amazing medical technology zone they're building in Andhra Pradesh, etc. And we had this interview, and at the end, he called me and said, that was so interesting for me to do this interview. Can you do things like this for us every month?
Oh, wow.
Can we talk about science in an interesting way? So we actually formed a partnership where every month we run something called Tech RX, which is medicine and technology coming together. And we feature the most interesting people who are doing work at the intersection of science and technology. So it's something very specific that has come out of a conversation. So sometimes you don't even know the impact you made. But I always say, as a listener, this is my submission to everybody who's listening, is that when you spend even 1 minute of your time on something, make the most out of it. So when you spend your time listening to this interview, think of one thing that'll change your life, something that someone said that you will remember, or even better, act on it. So that's my summary of, sometimes you don't know the impact, sometimes you do, and both ways it's surprising and amazing.
Yeah, no, I get that. I understand that part. My job is all about not knowing what impact you've made.
Exactly. But actually, yours, I just want to say one thing because we have very few minutes, is that for especially an IAS officer, one, you traverse completely different disciplines. You go from law to environment to education to all kinds of things. And you start very, very long term impact things. And in 3 years, you have moved on. So you actually, I think, as a profession, learn how to build a legacy which can function without you. So I really have to pay homage to professions like yours, which are really focused on, creating legacy without a personal stake in it. So the last question I have to ask you before we wrap up is, we have something called an Ink Tree Seed program, where out of this conversation, what action can we create together that we can follow through later?
I remember reading about your youth leadership program. So maybe
Yeah.
what we can do is we can have more women,
Yes.
girls who want to be entrepreneurs, because that's something that we've still not managed to do well in India. We don't have enough women starting their businesses, and enough girls dreaming about starting their businesses.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something that we can work on, and something more.
Great. Yeah,
something we
so
can
just to wrap up, Inc. Youth Leadership Program is something we've started in collaboration with a company called Polyup in US, and with collaboration with many educational institutions. The idea is to build amazing youth leaders in the high schools, and expose them to technology. They get to program using mathematics, not coding.
Yes.
And then design thinking, and then entrepreneurship, etc. So it'll be fantastic to have you as one of our advisors to ensure we get more women into the program.
Because innovations by women are so few in India.
Right. Yeah. And we should get more of them into the pipeline itself.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for your time, Ira, and it's been wonderful. And one of the big things is, I want to say little things like how to say a name. When you say IRA, we would have said it Ira, but you told me it's Ira. It's a name for Saraswati. So thank you for that. And so today we have Lakshmi, which stands for wealth, and Ira, that stands for Saraswati, which is knowledge. So it was wonderful to do a show with you where we are bringing the most important things together. And I want to thank my team, Rohan and Pasha, and Ritika, and Elsie, who've been part of putting this together. Thanks to my entire team, and thanks to all the listeners. And thank you, Ira. With that, we sign off. Lakshmi's Leadership Lounge. Join us again next Monday at 9 p.m. India Standard Time for the next show. Thank you. Bye bye.